Hello, friends, and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Universe Podcast. Today, after a far too long hiatus, but things just kept coming up, we are coming back to our Star Wars Rebels coverage with episodes 21 and 22, the final episodes of Season 3, 0 Hour. Riki Hayashi is joining me. All that and more after a commercial break we have no control over. Welcome back, friends. As you may have been hearing, maybe not, we had been doing episode-by-episode coverage of Star Wars Rebels, trying to hit like 2 or 3 episodes each week. And we were going strong for a while there, and then some new Star Wars content came out, and then people got sick, and people got busy, and just all sorts of things happened. So we had to put it on hold for a while. Then there was so much new Star Wars content this year to cover. But right now, we've got a nice lull between now and the Ahsoka show, and so me and Riki, and hopefully Sarah for a number of these episodes, are back to talk to you about Star Wars Rebels. And Riki, how are you feeling about coming back to this great show?
How dare they? How dare they interrupt our podcast with like 3 or 4 mostly good shows? Some amazing. Right? Like Andor, I've said, is my favorite Star Wars television show, or actually television show in general now of all time. Mm-hmm. And Mandalorian has been inconsistent, but overall I enjoy it. And Book of Boba Fett existed.
Yes. And I'm going to kind of call The Last of Us a Star Wars show just because it's Pedro Pascal doing Pedro Pascal things, but, you know.
Oh, and Kenobi. How could I forget Kenobi? I loved Kenobi. So, yes, we're back. We're back to Rebels. It's been a while. And personally, I think kind of a meme that happened in our previous coverage was, I would say, this is my favorite episode so far. Well, guess what? This is my favorite episode so far. The season 3, this is the season 3 finale. Season 3 was just amazing. An amazing season.
See, and that's a very hard bar to set, because I have to say, I had totally forgotten these episodes, because normally when I watch them, they come right after Twin Suns.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Or Twin Sun, which is in many ways, I think, probably my favorite episode of Rebels. And I think having given it a couple of months to just watch these on their own, I was like, oh, wait, these are really, really good. I still think that Obi-Wan Maul fight is just the pinnacle. Sure. But if these are your favorites now, then I'm all for it.
I don't know. Like, if you asked me to actually rank them, I would have no idea where to start. And you're right. Like, Twin Suns, the Maul, Obi-Wan interactions are amazing. And, of course, Twilight of the Apprentice, the season 2 finale with Ahsoka and Vader confronting each other, seeing each other for the first time since the end of the Clone Wars is amazing. And so this episode, or these episodes, like it's a 2-parter, 0 Hour Part 1 and Part 2, they're very different because those two deal heavily in the Jedi aspect and the history and the connections to other Star Wars media and franchises. This one stands on its own. This is like really what Rebels is about to me.
Yeah.
So that's what I love it for.
Yeah, it really is. And I will say now, we're going to have spoilers for these episodes. Yeah. If you haven't watched but you're planning to, maybe hit pause and come back. If you haven't watched and you don't think you're going to watch, don't worry. We'll give you a full summary. This is a great way to kind of get caught up on all the things happening so you're ready for the Ahsoka show, because we're definitely going to be kind of focusing in that direction as one of our focuses. And if you've seen it, of course, feel free to listen along. And I think you're right. I think I love the Jedi, I love the Sith, but I do really enjoy that we're getting more and more content, and Andor and Mandalorian have been great for this as well, that mostly leaves that stuff out. That is much more about the things happening. And I think this one doubly so, because I think it's easy to think that the rebellion was just this bunch of like random people doing random things that didn't really matter until Luke, Leia, and Han showed up and saved the day. And, you know, if you go deeper, I think it's easy to see that's not the case, but this really gives us so much of that, including seeing so much of the fleet coming together and eventually winding up on Yavin 4. And that especially is just such a high moment of, like, I remember I got chills the first time I heard that, of like, oh, okay, now now we have like locked the Legos in place, connecting this era to the movies, and now we're building towards Episode 4, A New Hope.
Right. I mean, there's stuff I do want to talk about, but I guess we should open with the summary. Yes?
Yeah, let me do that first. So here's the summary from Wikipedia, and I'll kind of add editorially as is appropriate. Various rebel cells begin gathering in Adelon to prepare for the attack on Lothal. Adelon is the kind of secret place where they have found to gather. It's where the Bendu is and all that sort of stuff. Thrawn is aware of the rebel plans and tells Governor Pryce and Grand Moff Tarkin that, quote, the real performance is about to begin, and he's already planned a trap for them. Kallus tries to warn the rebels, but is captured by Thrawn. Thrawn traces Kallus's transmission and determines the rebels' base location is at Adelon. And he does that through, I think, one of the best illustrations of how he uses art in a really powerful way. It's a great little Thrawn moment. Thrawn sends his fleet to Adelon, which includes 2 interdictor cruisers. With the interdictors in orbit, it is impossible for rebel ships to escape, and the fleet is forced to fight a losing battle against the Imperials. Knowing that their only chance is to send someone out to summon the rest of the rebel fleet, Commander Sato sacrifices himself by crashing into Constantine's interdictor, giving Ezra a window to escape. On Adelon, Kanan attempts to ask the Bendu for help, but the Bendu is reluctant due to its neutral role. Kanan then accuses the Bendu of being a coward, which angers the Bendu, and it disappears. In hyperspace, Ezra contacts Mon Mothma for help, but she's unable to send reinforcements due to fear of them getting caught in another of Thrawn's traps. With no option left, Ezra decides to ask Sabine for help. With the battle going poorly, the rebels are forced to retreat back to their base on Adelon and activate its shield generator, protecting them from the Imperial fleet's bombardment. Thrawn responds by sending a ground force to assault the base. Ezra reaches Sabine and convinces her and Rao to lead a small Mandalorian force to destroy the remaining interdictor cruiser, which will allow the rebels to escape. Thrawn's forces breach the base defenses, but before he can capture the rebels, the Bendu intervenes, attacking the Imperial forces and distracting them long enough for the rebels to evacuate, but attacks them as well. At the same time, Ezra and Sabine destroy the interdictor, Kallus escapes imprisonment and ejects in an escape pod to be picked up by the Ghost crew. The rebel fleet then escapes. Back on the surface, Thrawn incapacitates the Bendu, who warns Thrawn that it had already foreseen his defeat. Refusing to believe this, Thrawn attempts to kill the Bendu personally, but it disappears before the shot could hit it. The remaining rebel fleet leaves to rendezvous with the rest of the rebellion at Yavin 4, and Hera promises to help Sabine and the Mandalorians on an upcoming mission. Ezra is worried about the massive defeat the rebellion has suffered, but Kanan points out that it is in fact a victory since they escaped. He then tells Ezra that he foresees a future where everybody is free, but that they will have to fight to make it happen. And this is the last episode to take place in 2 BBY, 2 years before the Battle of Yavin. So yeah, a lot happens. Where do you want to jump in first?
I think I want to start with the whole greater rebellion thing that you mentioned about making that connection to A New Hope and to Yavin. Like we physically reach it at the end. And then in this episode, we also get to see the character of Jan Dodonna, who is the general who commands the base on Yavin in that movie, right? So we get that connection. We see his fleet. He's got a couple of, I think they're frigates, assault frigates, and like the blockade runners. So now we are also really starting to see the breadth of the rebellion. Like, so far, we've really only been focused on this one cell, Phoenix Squadron. But now we're introduced to Jan Dodonna. He's got a fleet, and we see a number of ships, and we finally start to see, like, okay, this is, in fact, like, building to more than just rebels, more than just, like, isolated freedom fighters. It's an actual movement that is coming together.
Yeah, it's really powerful, and it's everything from Mon Mothma having her concerns, but also the reminder that she's not in control of everything, and that others are coming from other directions, and it really is just a wonderful thing to get to see, and to me it shows how much care they have, because I think with every prequel, there's always this concern about how is this all going to fit together, and, you know, Rebels, I think like a lot of other prequel Star Wars things, you know, raises some questions about, okay, this doesn't seem to quite exactly fit, but But for the most part, I think it does a good job, and this is really the high point of that.
Yeah, what this does for me is it not necessarily corrects that, not that it was wrong, but really fills in the gaps of one of the issues I always had with A New Hope, which was how small the rebellion seemed, right? Because that base on Yavin, when the Death Star shows up, all they have is X-Wings and Y-Wings, like a couple of squadrons of fighters. And it's like, how are you going to defeat like even one Star Destroyer, let alone an entire Imperial Navy? But I think the picture now that we get is that basically, as also in Rogue One, right? Because the leadership met on Yavin to discuss the Death Star, and then many of them said, nope, we're out, and they scattered.
Right.
So the idea is that the rebellion leadership met, but then they all scattered, so there wasn't really that centralized force at Yavin, but there was some important leadership still there, and that was what was at stake.
Right, and you do see that, I guess the implication is that the Death Star being destroyed is what brings them back together.
Yes.
Because you do see a lot of those ships fleeing from Hoth early in the next movie.
Yeah, and then at the end of Empire, you definitely see like what is to be the rebel fleet that assaults the second Death Star, right? Like the pieces of that are there. And so that's what I like about material like Rebels, where we do see, you know, because I love starships and starfighters, so we see those different starships and starfighters present that will be there in future battles. But the idea is that these individual leaders, whether they're generals, admirals, or whatever, they have their small cell, but they are afraid to bring them together, like, as you said, until the Death Star is destroyed, and that becomes like a very symbolic rallying cry that we don't have to hide anymore. We can take this battle directly to them. Right.
No, I think that's very true. And I think that's one of the really beautiful things about how all this plays out. As well as the fact that, you know, we've been setting up this tension, but like that the Mandalorians are kind of a neutral party who's leaning a little bit towards our heroes. And so having them come back and join, I also thought was just really powerful.
Yeah, well, it's Clan Ren, Sabine's clan. Right. But they do mention that they are still in conflict. That I think they do call it a civil war with Clan Saxon on Mandalore. Even though Gar Saxon was, I think, killed in this series, right, earlier. They still have to kind of clean up his family and his troops.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and we'll see, again, that all just plants seeds for what we're going to see later in Mandalorian, of course, and all that. One little character moment that I want to use as a way to start talking about General Thrawn, that I think itself is a beautiful moment, because it kind of illustrates what Thrawn has had to deal with throughout all of this. Because we do see a lot of Thrawn's military genius here, and that one of his big problems, again, I'm talking about it from the perspective of here's the strategic flaws he's dealing with. I'm not admiring him. I think there's a whole conversation about, like, is Thrawn an anti-hero? Is he a villain? I think in this, he is very much clearly a villain. But throughout, he's had this running rivalry with Admiral Constantine, and Constantine is clearly inferior to him in every way. Constantine knows this, and Constantine is constantly bucking against that. And what they're setting up there is so how that plays out is that when Constantine sees that Sato, who is the kind of commander of Phoenix Squadron, who has defeated Constantine himself a number of times, Constantine moves his interdictor cruiser to intercept Sato, and Sato's moving forward because he, as he says, he won't let Thrawn get the glory. Yes. And of course, what happens is he's pushed out of position, and then Sato crashes into him, and in so doing destroys the cruiser. But even before that had happened, the cruiser being out of position is what allows Ezra and Sabine to escape. And it's just kind of a fun moment. It's Constantine's end, and it's the perfect end for him as a person who's constantly having to fight against the authority. But I also just thought it was a great illustration of this is what happens in military dictatorships. This is what happens when military advancement has a lot to do with who says the right things, and military punishment is a lot who challenges the established ideas, and also who screws up is punishable by death. Mm-hmm. And so the the need for individual glory, the need to wrap yourself in that is very much exactly what he would expect from Constantine. And so see, it was both kind of like just a fun moment and a nice way to explain how they win, but also I just thought like a really nice illustrative moment of how the Empire works.
And there was a great quote by Thrawn shortly before that, where he's got Agent Callus, after he captured him, trying to send a transmission to the rebels. He's got him on his bridge as a prisoner, and he's kind of doing that gloating, I'm going to let you watch while I kill your friends thing.
Right.
And Callus is constantly like needling at Thrawn while in manacles. And at one point, Thrawn says to him, I do not require glory, only results for my emperor. So, right, that is exactly what you're saying about Constantine is hungry for glory. Thrawn doesn't care about glory. He only cares about getting results, meaning defeating the rebels in this case.
Right.
But I also thought it was interesting that he said only results for my emperor, right? Not empire, but specifically the figure of the emperor. I thought that was very interesting.
It really is. And I think this is where we are really seeing TV Thrawn differ quite distinctly from the novels Thrawn.
Yes.
Which are being written at a kind of similar time, and it's interesting, but because the second set of novels, the canon novels about Thrawn, is really where you get him being very critical of the Emperor. And him talking about how he thinks the Empire is a necessary evil, and he's trying to subvert funds away from the Death Star project towards his TIE Interceptor project and things like that. And here, that doesn't seem to be the case at all.
Well, he is. I mean, the TIE Defender project.
Right.
He definitely... I don't think the Death Star specifically mentioned... Maybe it is later on. We'll see. I can't quite remember. But there is definitely that conflict of the funding.
I think there is, but I think he is very explicitly feeling like the Death Star is a terrible, terrible idea and a sign of how the Emperor is a bad military leader in the novels. That I think we never get to that extent here. But yeah, and so it's just a great illustration of him. And that's kind of a good entryway. Thrawn is obviously getting a lot of attention these days. We're going to see him in the Ahsoka show. We know who's cast as him. It is the same voice actor, which is awesome.
Lars Mikkelsen.
Yep. From a lot of other things fame as well. What do you think about kind of what we see of Thrawn in this episodes?
This Thrawn, you said earlier, he is, whether he's an anti-hero or a villain, it's so difficult for me because I think I've said this. I like Thrawn. I might even say that I love Thrawn in a fandom, in a fictional character way. I think he is one of the best characters we have in Star Wars. And you cannot ignore the fact that he is evil, that he commits acts of evil. And again, that, as you mentioned, that varies based on whether you're talking about his character from this Rebels or from the novels. And that makes it even, I think it makes it even more complicated to be a fan of Thrawn, because it's there do seem to be several different versions of him, even though they are supposed to be the same character. And so how do we interpret that? I don't know how to answer that. We have to, each of us as a fan has to answer that for ourselves. But there's no denying that he is compelling. The acting, Lars Mikkelsen's acting in this is great. And I'm not rooting for him because I don't want the Rebels to lose, but I am still kind of intrigued and excited by the way that he tactically outsmarts people and the way that he figures stuff out. I think that's what makes him so interesting.
Part of how, so for example, that finding the Rebel base, it's because he notices that the trajectory that Callus sent his message on and the trajectory that the fleet that's coming to help intersect at a point, and that because he has studied the art of other people in the area, that their art indicates that there's a star there that has been kind of erased from Imperial maps and Rebel maps because of the presence of the Bendu. Mm-hmm. And so that's just it's a small moment. It's 5 seconds and it's gone, but it is it really shows the kind of tactical genius and the way he uses. Like when you say someone uses art to understand everything about a species, a lot of art historians probably get really happy, but it'll also be like, yeah, it's not quite that simple. And it's a point that they go into in much more detail in the original novels, the Heir to the Empire novels. I think it's kind of brushed over for the most part in this because it's hard to kind of do without a lot of exposition. But this one scene was a really nice way to kind of lampshade that and be like, this is the kind of thinking he brings.
Yes, this is much better than I have studied the art of your species, so I know exactly what military tactic you will use. Now, he does mention when Admiral Sato makes a military maneuver, he does mention, I think, the tactic being used and the planet that Sato is from, but it isn't like I can predict your exact movement. It's like, I've studied you as well. Like, he studied Sato's tactics.
Right. Definitely. One last thing I want to say about Thrawn is that for those who are wanting to read the books, one of my personal favorites of the Thrawn novels is one of the newer ones, Thrawn Alliances. And in that book, I'll spoil as little as I can, but I'll just say the book happens in two parts. One part is when he is on a mission with Anakin, and then later he's on a mission with Vader. And in that mission with Vader and others are constantly needling him because he had a recent great failure. And the failure is this battle that we just saw in 0 Hour. So that's kind of a cool connection there. Let's talk about the Bendu, because he has been one of my favorite characters, and I really like what winds up happening with him, and like kind of some of the commentary that they make with him. How do you feel about how the Bendu story played out?
I don't think I liked it as much, maybe as much as you, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Like, the reason I didn't like it was that the Bendu takes like this total neutrality stance in this. Like, I'm not going to take sides. Like, I'm not your friend. I'm not your ally. Speaking to Kanan Jarrus. But then he kind of does, like, yes, he does destroy some rebel ships as well. So like maybe he's being balanced, but it feels like Kanan manipulated him into this situation of getting mad and like having the storm that helps them escape. And I'm not sure that I believe that the Bendu could be tricked by Kanan into doing this. So it seems intentional, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you said. I think I just have a different take on it. First of all, I 100% agree, and I think this is intentional, that the Bendu represents that kind of, I'm a centrist, I don't care about politics, or both sides are equally bad, I'm just going to be neutral position, that I think the show is very clearly saying is nonsense, I would use a stronger word, but this is a family-friendly podcast, that he's clearly saying, like, look, when there is oppression and an oppressor, you doing nothing is just helping the oppressor, and you're going to be in danger from it too, but also, like, you have this power. This is something you can do to help. And I really like the Bendu as a force power, like a force user, but it's so much more than just like, an individual Jedi or Sith who stands apart from the Jedi or Sith and stands apart from light side and dark side. And I think he really helps to broaden the mythology and the lore. But I think the idea that the flip side of that is this kind of nonsense neutrality of I'm not going to take a side, even though good and evil are pretty darn clear here. And I guess I think you're right. It's a little bit manipulative, especially when he calls him a coward. And that part, I rolled my eyes at a bit.
Yeah, it's like, I'm going to make you mad.
I guess that I took it as he made him mad, but then like, that got him to actually pay attention to the arguments Kanan was making. Yeah. And that on some level, he did believe that this is what he should be doing. I don't think he's even he or she, that this is what the Bendu should be doing. And especially the way he talks to Thrawn at the end of like saying, I have foreseen your downfall. Lets me feel like, yeah, he hurt some rebels too. I don't know if that was intentional or just because it's, you ask an elephant to come intervene with a bunch of ants on the floor. Like, it's hard for him to tell what he's doing. or maybe it is his just idea of balance. So I've got to help the rebels escape, but also not be too far on one side. But I think I liked the Bendu's character. I think the Bendu is totally wrong here, and I like the way Kanan calls him out, and that it to some extent works.
What this situation reminds me of is the prophecy of the Chosen One. Anakin Skywalker. They constantly are making reference to the Chosen One will bring balance to the Force, and the Jedi Council thinks that this is a good thing. And my argument has always been that the Jedi at that time period are ascendant. They are all powerful compared to the Sith. They think the Sith are extinct. So what do you think it means to bring balance in this situation? It means you're going to get knocked down a peg, right? And so the Bendu's neutrality here, instead of in neutrality, I would think would be to just withdraw completely from the situation. But his neutrality takes on an offensive neutrality of, I'm just going to destroy everything. But the Empire in this situation is ascendant. It is more powerful than the rebels. So by destroying everything, quote unquote, equally, he's really helping the rebels to bring balance in this situation, to bring them both down to the same low level in this battle.
See, this is one of those times where I wish that there was more consistency, especially between what's on screen and in the novels, because that has always been my understanding of it as well, that the balance was actually, because to some extent they reduce it to, two Jedi as Obi-Wan and Yoda and two Sith.
Yeah.
Palpatine and Vader. Then, of course, we know there's much more running around on both sides. I forget which one of the novels, but there's one of the novel that goes deeper into this that actually posits a very different interpretation. And it's not specifically talking about Vader. I think it's in the High Republic. And listeners, if you know what I'm talking about, please correct me. But where those Jedi are talking about how, and I actually think the part of it's from a Sith perspective, maybe. So I'm maybe getting a couple different works confused. No, it is from the High Republic perspective. But the idea being that they talk about how the Jedi work with the Force and try to sort of swim in the stream of the Force and its balance. The dark side seek to actively corrupt the Force and to grab hold of it and twist it to where they want it to go. And so from this perspective, eliminating the dark side, eliminating the Sith, is bringing the Force back into balance. I think that is what Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon and Mace Windu and all of them thought the prophecy meant. And I think it's an interesting question to know, I would actually be happiest if the idea is this is theology, this is mythology, and different people have different ideas. Some people think balance to the Force means balance between light side and dark side. Others think it means destroying the dark side entirely. And I'm both enjoying that, but I think this conversation we're having, it's kind of like the back and forth discussions of Thrawn. The fact that we have multiple sources that don't agree with each other, and we've never had that disagreement really addressed in a way where in the same work, two different characters propose these two different theories and discuss them, is, I think, kind of frustrating to me. And it makes me once again wish that they had done more to resolve, did Anakin fulfill the prophecy? Did Vader fulfill the prophecy? Is the prophecy fulfilled at the end of Revenge of the Sith? Is the prophecy fulfilled at the end of Return of the Jedi?
Right.
Is it never fulfilled?
Is it Rey?
Yeah.
Does Rey fulfill the prophecy? Yeah. Absolutely. So, so you mentioned the Bendu and Thrawn meeting at the end, which to me was very interesting because if I'm remembering right, up till then, Kanan and Ezra were the only characters to speak to the Bendu, right? So
yeah,
and then the Bendu appears, and obviously everyone sees him, but then he and Thrawn directly have a conversation. Thrawn, I don't believe that Thrawn is a Force user. I'm sure there are some fans out there who want to believe that or have some fanfic. But it is interesting to me that Thrawn gets to have a conversation with the Bendu here and seems to speak to some importance of Thrawn in the whole galactic mythology. Even if he's not a Force user, he's a figure to be reckoned with. And the specific quote, like, I'm not gonna spoil the end of Rebels and the end of Thrawn, but the Bendu says to him in this episode, I see your defeat, like many arms surrounding you in a cold embrace. And if you have watched the whole series and know how it ends, then it's very fitting. And if you haven't, then look forward to it. And I don't think that really spoils anything specific. But it's a very fitting line that makes it clear that they had already kind of plotted out what was going to happen at this point.
Well, that's what I was going to say is I wonder if they had plotted it out and so they wrote this, or if they wrote this and then were like, okay, so how do we end this in a way that fulfills what they said?
Sure.
It might have been they had like a vague idea, but then they got more specific by the end. But who knows?
Fair enough.
Filoni has given so many interviews where he's answered so many of these questions, and I wish they were all kind of compiled somewhere. But if anyone who's seen all of those knows the answer to that, again, please let us know.
But whichever way it is, here's the thing. Me personally, like, I have a lot of criticism of J.J. Abrams as a creator of, like, good, interesting mystery boxes that once you open it don't make sense. And, like, the thing is that J.J. Abrams doesn't seem to know how to, finish something. Mm-hmm. To me, like, this is a good example of someone who has, like, set something up and then finishes it well. Whichever, like, whether they knew the finish already or that they looked at this line and say, okay, well, we have to finish in a way that's consistent. And I love that. To me, that has been something about Star Wars that they have been doing a pretty good job with. There's a lot of material out there for Star Wars. And they are doing, in my opinion, a good job of connecting some pieces and loose threads and even explaining things. The fact that Rogue One is an entire movie to explain why you can blow up the Death Star by firing a photon torpedo in that one place. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's been really well done. And I have a further thought on that I will share in a very brief spoiler section at the end of this episode.
Okay.
But yeah, what else do we want to talk about?
I want to briefly kind of go back to the character of Jun Sato, and I think it's important for me to address this as a Japanese person.
I had a question that I was going to ask you off air if it was a topic you wanted to address that I think you're about to get into.
Let's talk
go
about
ahead.
Let's talk about it. So, Japan does not exist in Star Wars, but Sato is a very common Japanese name. And I believe the character is voiced by Keone Young, who is a Hawaiian-born person of Japanese descent. So clearly, like, he's coded as Japanese, whatever that means in Star Wars.
And he has an accent that at least to my ears sounds like it sounds like Japanese, and it sounds like a much more respectful portrayal of a Japanese accent than we got, for example, with the Trade Federation, which is horrifically racist.
I mean, to me, it sounds like someone is kind of trying to pay respects to or homage to George Takei in some sense.
Yeah, I can see that.
So you have a Japanese admiral who, in this battle, crashes his ship into the opposing ship in order to create a tactical opening, which was a thing that happened during World War II called kamikaze, or in English it's called kamikaze, of when the fighter planes would crash into United States warships in order to try to inflict as much damage as possible. And it was a military tactic. It was a decision that the higher-ups made and ordered their pilots to do. And because of kind of the fanaticism and call it brainwashing of the military and the pilots, they did it. They did it for the glory of the Japanese Empire. And to me, like, that is a dark history. Like, the whole thing of Imperial Japan is a dark part of our history. And these actions of making your soldiers do something like this I think it's disgraceful. So it was difficult for me to watch this and not think of that, to see the Japanese coded character taking this action. Right. It was done in a more respectful way than other things have done with a similar thing. And I do think it was interesting that the pilots or whatever on the bridge stayed with him, and they said, Admiral, we'd like to stay at our posts or whatever. And so I think that made it better, call it, like softened the blow and shared the responsibility, I guess. But it still wasn't my favorite moment for those reasons,
I can see that, and I'm really glad you brought it up. As I said, I was thinking about it, but I wanted to kind of check in with you first before, so I'm really glad you just brought it up. For me, watching it, like, on the one level, it felt like, and I think it's kind of what you were saying, they did it very differently than the history that you were discussing, in that
yes.
It is Sato's decision, no one orders him to do it, and he specifically tells everyone on the ship to get off, and that he wants to do it for a very strategic reason that works. Do you think it would have been, if they had it be a different commander who was commanding that ship, who wasn't Japanese coded, would you have felt a lot better about that scene?
Yeah, of course. I mean, look at The Last Jedi, where Admiral Holdo does a very similar thing, right? So I think there are some things where it's not that you can't do certain things with certain characters, but I don't know who made this decision and why, but maybe like there needs to be some questions in an interview, like, hey, why was this decision made? Maybe there are, but and the other thing I will say about it is that in this case, it is a good, sound, tactical decision, right? Like, it succeeds. Mm-hmm. He draws out Constantine's interdictor, which they need to do to break the blockade. I wish that maybe he had said something like that's Constantine's ship. Like, I know I can egg him on or something like that. Like to bring specific attention that he knows what he's doing. And, what I will say about the kamikaze in World War II is that, in my opinion, they were not sound tactical decisions. Like, it doesn't really make sense. It was done, in my opinion, by the leadership to like just save face and or like inflict as much damage as possible to the U.S. without caring for their own troops. And we use the phrase "war is hell," but I think it's incumbent on leadership to care to some degree. Like people are going to die in war, but I think if you don't show that you care about the lives of your troops, they are not going to fight as hard for you.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and I think that's, bringing it all the way back around, that goes back to, life in a military where if you make a mistake, Vader or someone else might just kill you.
Yeah.
That's not a... And interestingly, there is in the original Thrawn novels, Heir to the Empire, a scene where one officer shows gross incompetence and a refusal to kind of listen and learn, and Thrawn does have him killed. But in doing so, he's constantly reminding people that he thinks Vader was mistaken. And then on many occasions, when people make mistakes, but he's able to ascertain, like, this is a good faith mistake or something out of their control, he doesn't harm them the way Vader would have often done. And even in one case, someone screws up but was clearly showing inventive thinking, Thrawn rewards him.
Yeah, it was Luke Skywalker escapes their tractor beam. And he goes to the tractor beam operator and says, explain to me what happened. And this guy thinks he's dead. Like, he thinks he's going to be killed. But he explains. He's like, he did this. Like, I wasn't expecting it. But then I tried this, thinking, maybe I could recapture him with the tractor beam. Unfortunately, it didn't work. And Thrawn says, okay, I like the innovation, the quick mind thinking you showed there. Continue working on that so that next time the rebels try this, we don't let them escape. And he rewards him basically with showing that respect on the bridge and giving him a job, I guess, a future job.
And there's a great line in it. I forget exactly the wording of it, but Captain Palion, who's basically his kind of second command and our point of view character, he basically says that that was the moment where he knew that Vader's influence was fully gone. This was now Thrawn's fleet.
Yes.
And it's because Thrawn has shown that the days of you were in command when something bad happened, therefore it's your fault, therefore I'm going to kill you, are over with for good. Yeah.
And that's exactly the Thrawn that gives, some fans chills, right? And I really like this character. And we get less of that in Rebels, so that there does seem to be some distinction.
And I also appreciate the way you talked about liking someone in fandom. Like, I enjoy watching the Purple Man on screen. I watch Jessica Jones again and again. I think Jessica Jones herself is an amazing character. It's incredibly well written, but a big part of it is David Tennant is terrifying and enthralling, and you want to keep watching. And I think that's what a good villain often does. And Thrawn is very much that as well.
Yeah, and just so excited. I don't know that there could have been anyone else that they could get, but the fact that they did get Lars Mikkelsen to continue portraying him in live action is obviously great for us as fans, like old fans. I think it's going to be great for new fans too, if they haven't engaged with this media or don't like cartoons or whatever, right? Like, now more people get to experience Lars Mikkelsen as Thrawn. Like, I'm happy for you all.
No, I think it's definitely true. I'm a little nervous about the blue makeup, but I think they can make it work. So we will see.
Oh, yeah. There's been some bad, in my opinion, bad, like, fan edits where he's got, like, stubble with the blue makeup. I'm like, what? No. That's not Thrawn.
But I do really appreciate, you to go back, you bring up the point with Sato and the, and the way he takes out that cruiser. Because I think, to me, that's the kind of discourse that I want to see more of. And I think, I'm not going to throw it out completely and be like, this is terrible and racist. I just, like, if I had the opportunity to talk to some of the creators, I would have questions about it. No, I think it's fair. And I wonder if it was the kind of thing where it just didn't occur to them that it would be a thing, or if they thought it would be kind of like an appropriate nod to the culture and tradition because they know that's a thing that Japanese pilots did, and they don't really know much of the history and behind it. And again, it's just one more reason to have diverse people in your writer's room, or at least people who you're consulting with, because, maybe they could have gotten a different perspective. But as I said, the portrayal of a Japanese coded character is still so much better than the Trade Federation that alone feels like a big step.
And perspective on cultural issues, like, is never monolithic. Like, I am only speaking to my own personal opinions as someone who has grown up as a Japanese person in a family that's Japanese. But even like other Japanese people like in fandom may have a different opinion on that. And of course, like historically, I am sure that there are people in Japan who think the kamikaze were like honorable soldiers and like they respect their sacrifice, right? I think it's disgraceful and sad that they were ordered to do that and that they chose to do that. And I think that they're, like, I've never been in the military, and it's complicated, but there are situations where people in the military will tell you that you should no longer follow orders, like unethical orders. And I just cannot imagine being in that situation. It's hard to imagine. And I cannot say for certain, like if you were put in that position, what you would do. Like, I don't think it's fair for me in such a safe place to say something like that. But I don't like it, is what I'll end.
That's fair. And again, I'm really glad you brought it up. I think in terms of the space battle itself, there's not... It just looked awesome, and I was so glad to see it. I think we don't often get capital ships fighting with each other. And so getting to see the Star Destroyers taking on these frigates and these cruisers and pretty much, beating the heck out of them. It was great to watch because I think that's a sign of the combat that we don't get to see very often. And of course we just had all these great fighter chases going on, and it was just, and a lot of other nice tie-ins, like the general who comes back, who we said will be the general who leads the briefing on Yavin in A New Hope. The ships he's piloting are some bigger ships, but also are the Y-wing fighters that Ezra and the rest of them helped steal way back when, which is another nice kind of tie-in of it all.
Everything fits in nicely. That's for sure. It's Star Wars. Like most space combat media handles it this way, but it's just like, why is it usually two-dimensional, right? Other than the fighters. The fighters often like weave in and out, but the capital ships just seem to always like broadside each other in two dimensions.
Yeah, so it's nice to see more of that. There's two quick things I want to do before we end this episode. One, deal with some sad news. The other was the spoiler section I mentioned. But before that, Riki, is there anything else about these episodes you want to mention?
I wrote down some of the quotes that I mentioned, but I think to me, my favorite quote, favorite part of this episode was actually the very beginning, where the rebels, they don't know that they've been discovered yet. So they are actually planning an assault on Lothal to destroy the TIE Defender factories. And Ezra is talking to Kanan, and he says, like, I can't believe you all did this, because Ezra is from Lothal. That's where he was born and grew up. So he is really excited to, like, go back and free his people or inflict some damage on the Empire on that planet. And he thanks Kanan and says, thank you for everything you've done, right? Like, and for bringing this all together. And then Kanan had such a beautiful moment where he, as his mentor, gives credit back to Ezra and said, you did this too. You're a part of this too. And I think that's such a beautiful moment for a mentor to his mentee to, like, give them credit and bring them into the success. And I thought that was important. But then even more important, after that, Ezra says, because he's like talking about training him as a Jedi too. And he says, I don't mean about the Force, about life, about how to be a good person. That's what you've taught me. And I don't know. It just gets to me. It's such a beautiful moment between those two characters and what they have been through and how they truly, like, have helped each other to learn.
It really is. And I think it hits on a couple of different levels. First of all, it is a marked contrast to the relationship between Thrawn and Constantine, or either of them with Admiral Price or with Cullis, who, all of those are relationships between superiors and lower officers, and they're all fraught with tension and rivalry and a lack of credit and the like. And so the Kanan Ezra thing is so different. The other part of it is, this is a sign of attachment. They have an emotional bond. Like, can you imagine Obi-Wan or Anakin saying something like this to each other? It never happens. And they've never really kind of lampshaded this, and so maybe they're not going to go forward with this. But I have always felt that it is fairly intentional that Kanan and Ezra, like, Mace Windu would think they're horrible Jedi. They'd keep doing all the things that break the rules. Kanan literally has a girlfriend or a spouse who we know they treat Ezra like family. It's all of these things that the Jedi were not supposed to do. And this to me is just such a beautiful underlining of that, of like, we're noticing that the Jedi got wiped out, and maybe some new directions is important. And I think it's something that's been carried on in a lot of the other media and movies and shows and stuff like that. And so to me, I'm really glad you mentioned that scene, because to me, that was really one of the moments where I was like, oh, these are not Jedi the way that the Old Republic and the Palpatine days were.
Yeah, well, when Ezra returns with the Mandalorian reinforcements, he went to Sabine and came back with reinforcements. Sabine, has been a main character, a part of this crew, but she's been missing for however many episodes dealing with stuff on Mandalore. And when Ezra calls them and says, hey, I'm back with friends, Kanan says, looks like the family's together again. Like, he uses those words, like, unironically, this is a family. And it's, people call shows like this found family, and that is absolutely the truth. And that's how the characters act. That's how it's all written. I think that's why we like it. And you're right. Like, the Jedi, I think Kanan and Ezra, their relationship, they talk about this often in their training of, like, this was how the Jedi do it, but I'm not gonna. Like, we're just gonna find our own path.
Yeah, it's really well done. Well, I'm so glad we got to talk about this episode. There's a lot of great stuff. Definitely suggest people check it out. And I'm really glad you're talking about Rebels again. I'm going to say one bit of sad news that is connected to Rebels that I know Riki's going to say more on, and then have a brief spoiler section. And then, of course, we'll have the Patreon section at the end. The sad news, which many of you may have heard, is that Ray Stevenson passed away recently. He's an actor who's played a number of roles in the kind of media we love. I probably know him best because I did minute-by-minute coverage of Thor on the Marvel Movie Minute, and he plays Volstagg in that movie, and I believe in all of the Thor movies. Just a wonderful character actor, wonderful actor. And so you probably can recognize him from Thor, but he's also been in a number of things that are connected to Star Wars and to other things geeks love. And so, Riki, I'll let you say some more about him.
Yeah, I mean, relevant to Rebels, he was the voice actor for Gar Saxon, the Imperial Viceroy on Mandalore, who they defeated earlier this season. And he was slated. I don't know how to phrase this, but he is going to be in Ahsoka, in the live action Ahsoka show. He's cast in that. I think they've done principal filming. He appears in the trailer. I know, Matthew, you don't like to be spoiled, so I won't say like who his character is or what he's doing, but that they already have stuff. Yeah. So he is deeply connected to Star Wars. Was only 58 years old, which I just, when I see ages of people who pass and it's something like that, it just shocks me, and it was certainly a sad day for the Star Wars community, but just all of us in geek fandom. You mentioned Thor. I believe he was also in the Punisher Warzone movie. So he's just been in a lot of things, which I would think means that he's a fan of these things and was a geek at heart as well. And so, yeah, it is very sad. And we wish the best to his friends and family.
Definitely sad. Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. I'd posted a bit about it in the Marvel Movie Minute community because of the Thor connection. But I think you're right. I hadn't even really known about the Star Wars connections, so I'm so glad you brought that back up. Last thing, and this will be a brief spoiler section, I'm just going to mention something that about Season 4. If you haven't seen it yet, go skip ahead like 60 or 90 seconds. Spoiler in 3, 2, 1. I do think it's really interesting that the Bendu never comes back. The Bendu says, you can't kill me. He never comes back. And we're soon going to get a TV show about a Force user who has left the Jedi and is presumably interested in learning about perspectives on the Force outside of the Jedi and the Sith. I think it's a very long shot that we get the Bendu back, or that we get him back, get the Bendu back specifically in Ahsoka. Actually, I checked something. The Bendu is male, just beyond a lot of other things, or at least male presenting. But I would be very curious to know, but I'd be very interested to know, what happened to the Bendu, because the Bendu kind of made this promise, I'll be back, you can't kill me. And as far as we know, never actually did anything again. And I'd be curious to know, was the Bendu active behind the scenes? Has the Bendu been, recovering and just has a very different view of time, and is sometime maybe in these books, or maybe even in the movies, or maybe in the Rey movies coming up, 15 more years down the road, the Bendu is going to show back up again? The Bendu is such an interesting character that I hope we get him back at some point. Yeah,
and here's the thing. The Bendu, we use the Bendu or Bendu as this character's name, right? But I guess my question is the Bendu even a entity? I was going to say person, but that's a weird word to use. Is the Bendu actually an individual entity, like a creature? Mm-hmm. Or, because I think when we were introduced to him, he says something like the light, the dark, or the Jedi, the Sith, I am what is in between, I am the Bendu. So it's not even, it doesn't even feel like it's actually his name, although they use it that way, the other characters call him that. But I wonder if he's just a concept, and it's just this is the physical manifestation of a concept somehow.
I mean, we saw in the Clone Wars episodes that when they went to this planet called Mortis, where there were living embodiments of both the light side and the dark side. So for there to be, the metaphysics of that episode have never quite matched up with a lot of other things in the show, in the canon. But yeah, it'd be interesting to know. Maybe he is kind of an equivalent manifestation, or maybe there are many Bendu, and so it'll be this particular Bendu may not come back, but others will. We don't know.
Yeah. Well, maybe to go to another property, maybe it's the Q.
Yeah.
Right, because Q, the character Q, played by John Delancey in Star Trek, we're talking about, is a character, is an individual being. But the Q continuum, all exists kind of as one thing. I think. I don't know. They've done a lot of weird things on Star Trek. I haven't watched Picard yet.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Very interesting to see. All right. Well, thank you so much. As I said, we'll have a little bit more in a Patreon section, but for those who are getting off the train now, Riki, say a little bit more about where people can find you.
Oh, yeah. Well, I am streaming Pokemon Go battles on Twitch, twitch.tv/RikiPediaGo. And you can find me also on Twitter at RikiPediaGo, RikiPediaGo. And yeah, we hang out, have a good time. We do talk about Star Wars, Star Trek, a lot of things. In addition to Pokemon.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And of course, this is an Ethical Panda production. You can find all the podcasts I do on theethicalpanda.com. Over on superhero ethics, we're talking about a lot of great stuff. I'm also going to be doing episodes for Indiana Jones, those movies, on Bingers Assemble, which is a Stranded Panda podcast. I'm looking forward to talking about those. Please check out all that. And most especially, we love feedback. The most recent superhero ethics episode, it was really addressed 2 pieces of listener feedback because we had great conversations about both of them. But we got into a question about Guardians of the Galaxy and the way animals were treated in that movie. And then we got into a conversation about the kind of question we've been discussing for a while of, does great power come with great responsibility, and how do you approach that? Which, spoiler, is the question I'm going to ask Riki in our Patreon section. So please give us feedback. You can find The Ethical Panda on any of the places. All that social media is down below in the show notes or on theethicalpanda.com. And most importantly, have a great day, because we have spoken.
I am what is in between. I am the Riki.
I like it.
Yeah, I don't know about that character. Like, it seems like they're just kind of making a lot of stuff up on the fly.
Unlike everything else in Star Wars. But anyway, that's the intro to our Patreon section. You patrons get to hear us still going over that question. And I'm sure we'll come back to it. But Riki, I want to ask you, does great power come with great responsibility?
That's what Uncle Ben says.
Yes, it is.
And or Aunt May.
Are they right?
But whoa, are you asking me, like, philosophically, like, in the real world or in comic books? Like,
yeah, I guess I'm just saying, like,
where are we
do you
going
think
with
they're
this?
right? Is that a moral precept that heroes should live by? And is a moral precept that anybody with power should live by?
Yes, I think it's something that we should all live by. And I like, in the case of the actual quote, like, they use the word great because it's referring to Spider-Man, and he has great, he has superpowers. Although I guess Uncle Ben doesn't know that, but, like, it is in the stories, it is referencing his superpowers, and how because he has these superpowers, he has a responsibility to use them to oppose other people's superpowers and to protect people who don't have superpowers, right? That's how I understand it in Spider-Man. And how I understand it in the world is that you and I don't have superpowers. It's arguable if we even have powers, by whatever definition. But what power we do have, what influence we do have, I think I would use the word influence. Yeah. I think we all have a responsibility to use our influence responsibly and in a positive way. And I know, like, when you and I have conversations about this, I'm very big on this idea that in fandom or in a community, like a gaming community, each one of us has a piece of a shared responsibility to make that fandom, make the community a good, positive, inclusive, welcoming space. Obviously, like, as Magic judges or former Magic judges, like, we understand that responsibility. But I think even, like, what I have tried to live by is that, like, in a space like Twitter, on a social media space, the words that I use have impact on somebody. Like, I have followers. Yeah. They read these words, and it can change their moods. It can change their outlook on things. And I try to be very careful about what I say and how I say it for that reason, and try to use my words to steer people in a more positive direction. Like, that's how I feel about that quote and how I view the responsibility and influence.
I think that's a really good way to phrase it. And I especially love all the stuff about community there, because I like that idea that kind of by being a part of community, we are buying into a sense of shared community and shared responsibility for upholding that community. I think I have a little bit of a different spin on it because I think with great power comes great responsibility it can turn into a way to bully someone in a way that I think is not the best. And I do think, for example, like I'm never a fan of, I'm not the biggest fan of Superman, but I know that there are stories, particularly in the comics, where it talks about how he sometimes faces this constant question of, is it ever okay for him to not rush out to save the cat in the tree or the person who's about to be in a car crash because he wants to spend time with Lois or he wants to spend time with his family. And I think there's something to be said for the idea that I think this is maybe having it both ways, but I kind of feel like with great power comes great responsibility, and there is a responsibility to point that out to those who are not living up to that, and with any power. But that I think also there's something to be said for we each have to individually decide how we're going to use that power, and when we're going to use that power, and when we're going to say this isn't my battle. And I'll say, for example, for me, the rubric that I tend to use is, because I think the thing that phrase forgets, and especially people who reject that phrase can easily forget, is that there's a direct correlation so often between the fact that a person has power and the suffering that's happening that we think they should have a responsibility to deal with. And that to me, often those things should be very linked. That if you have the ability to help, you should help whoever you can, however you can, but especially you should hurt those who have been hurt because of the things that gave you the abilities you do. And so, example, for me, as a white person, as a male presenting person, I know I have a particular level of influence that people listen to me who might not in other situations. And I feel a particular responsibility, therefore, to speak out on issues of racism, issues on sexism. But the place where this probably comes into my life the most often is as a Christian, because I, as a Christian, am afforded a great deal of power and of privilege. And, I never have to explain why I want to take certain holidays off. I never have to explain why I've decorated my house the way I do. I have all of these things that I can just take for granted, and that I can go into a room, as I often did when I was a political activist, and say, I am here as a Christian and I believe this, and people take me more seriously than they would if someone said they were from a different tradition. And I don't think that's good, but I think as long as that's the case, I should do something with that. And so the corollary is, for me, I particularly speak out on issues where it is other Christians who are doing the most harm, around homophobia and transphobia, around anti-choice measures and stuff like that. So, yeah, I think, and it's kind of a corollary to what you were saying, but I think it kind of fits together in terms of that, like, we all have to figure out where do we sit in terms of communities, in terms of responsibilities, and then, yeah, if you have the opportunity to help people, and it's not causing direct harm to you in serious ways, I think, yeah, helping people is almost always the right choice.
Yeah, I love everything you just said, and I'm trying to like refit it back in with my own thinking and figure that out. Because when you mentioned Superman, let me start here. When you mentioned Superman, the immediate thing I thought of was the Injustice stories. Are you familiar with these? This was like a video game, and then they made a comic book, and I think even like an animated movie series, where the basic premise is that Superman becomes evil. Superman becomes a dictator. And it could be argued that he is following this philosophy, that he has the greatest power, so he has the greatest responsibility, and he uses that to what he believes is the right thing to achieve world peace, which is for him to become the dictator of the entire planet, because he has this vision, and he's like, I'm tired of letting other people fight over these things. Like, I'm right, you're all wrong, you have to listen to me now. And it could be argued that he's taking the ultimate responsibility with the ultimate power. I think he's wrong, right? Like, that's not how I think that philosophy works. So if I were to like amend my own philosophy, I think I have a pretty libertarian point of view on this, in terms of ultimately we are only responsible for ourselves, and we should only be responsible for ourselves. We should not abuse our power like in any way to like impose our will on other people. Like let other people make their decisions as long as they are not imposing their will and harming people.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth there. I think I don't go quite as far with a libertarian, but I think it to me it's just the question of agency becomes really important. And so to me, when someone else is taking agency and requesting help, there's a responsibility to help. I think when that becomes I know best, so I know what all these people need, even if they don't think that that's what they need. I think you're right. I guess that to me is one of the danger poles. And the other one I was talking about is when it becomes so much about self-sacrifice that it just becomes you're losing out on your responsibility yourself because you're burning out. And I talked more about this on the podcast I did with Paul, but for me, where a lot of this comes from is having worked in the nonprofit industry at a time when, if you went to a movie on a Friday night instead of going to a protest or a march or a meeting, people looked at you like you didn't care enough about the cause. And completely coincidentally, there was no one in the rooms I was working in who had been in the movement for more than 5 years because everybody burnt out. So yeah, I think I like the sentiment of great power comes great responsibility. I just think that I think what we're discussing is that there's so much more nuance that needs to go into it because it can be so badly applied in all directions.
Yeah, I mean, when you mention that, what I think of like living in LA is the issue of homelessness or unhoused people, right? And so many times, like policymakers, politicians, they say they want to address the issue, and they appear to be using their power for good to address the issue, but they're not asking the people who are affected, the actual unhoused people, like, what do you need? How can we help you? They're imposing their vision of it on it, of the problem and the solution without like talking to people. And I think like that's part of it is like the idea of like responsibility, like if people want to help, but I think we get too caught up in what that help is. And I'll say like we do it to make ourselves feel better rather than, making other people feel better, I guess, or actually helping them.
I think that's a really good way to say it, that it often is more about making ourselves feel better or even making others feel better. I think like homelessness is a great example where a lot of times unhoused people is a great example where I think a lot of times that politician's primary focus isn't what can I do that is best for the unhoused. It is right now the unhoused being on the street are unpleasant for the rest of our citizens to deal with. So how can I move the unhoused out of public spaces? Because because the goal is to do something that's better for those people instead of the actual people you're trying to help and serve. And I think that's maybe another corollary is thinking a lot about, okay, who is it you're responsible to then? And how are you living that out?
I mean, I see signs posted. There are rules against public parks have hours posted, like you cannot be here, after sunset or after 10 p.m. or whatever. And that's exactly to keep unhoused people from sleeping there, right? Like, so that there's a rule in place that you can point to and say no. And
in many of those, go ahead. In many of those places, you'll have benches that have spikes on them between the seats, specifically so that it's uncomfortable for people to lay down.
Yes, I agree. Like, it's often not as like malicious as spikes, but I see that infrastructure. It is much more innocent looking. It is just like an armrest, but it's an armrest that's exactly like 4 feet apart from the next one. So you can't sleep on that bench because most people are taller than that. And there are a lot of things like, I think there's some of this is changing in that public parks. There's a lot of public parks that were constructed without public restrooms, for example, which seems like a very basic thing that you want to have at a park. But the way those restrooms are used by unhoused people was seen as, unseemly by communities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And undesirable. So, I mean, this is something like, I don't know what the answer is for this issue, right? The specific issue. But like going back to the bigger, the topic of discussion, it's like, great power, great responsibility. I think like, yeah, you brought up responsibility to who and mentioned that politicians see their responsibility as being to their constituents and more cynically taxpayers, right? And so like unhoused people don't pay taxes, so why should politicians care about them? And they don't vote, like probably. I'm guessing a lot of them don't vote because they don't have
a fixed resident,
legal addresses. Yeah. So they can't vote. So yeah, I think that's probably a good way of looking at it.
I think that makes sense. Well, that's Riki and I solve the problems of the day. Hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for being patrons. If you have thoughts, as always, please contact us in any of the places. And we have spoken.
I don't think we solved any problems. But we talked about them, and I appreciate that. I like, for me, like expressing my opinion about these things is also just as much as like talking out loud. And then hopefully like people feel welcome to express their opinions and even to tell me I'm wrong. Like I'm happy to be wrong about things and to learn, to be educated. That's what I want. I don't know if you don't have to leave.
No, it's a great mission statement for the podcast. So, all right, now we're done.